I'm not sure if Tiffany, are you ready to talk about facilitation? I will begin. So let's talk about facilitation. I know we're very short on time as we're a little bit over, so we'll go as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So there are many attributes of a good facilitator, and we really could spend hours and hours talking about this. Our facilitation training really, as I mentioned, is a very lengthy process of interning and observing and learning and co-facilitating and then facilitating and reflecting on experiences and lessons learned. Any good facilitator, as you saw with Tiffany, is going to be neutral, so not including personal opinions or your own experiences, but really just there to validate and listen and being polite but firm. Tiffany is great at that, both virtually and in person. It can be difficult because you want to give people space, right, to share what is on their mind, and in hopes that they're getting to a point that will be very helpful for a researcher. But it can also be intimidating when one person does dominate a conversation. They should be respectful, have experience working with very diverse audiences. So you're going to be working with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different literacy levels, different communication styles. So being able to pick up on some of these cues and really cater your questioning and your responses to unique individuals is very important. You can have, here in Utah, we facilitate our groups, but we've also trained community members to facilitate. So that's what we're talking about, external versus institutional facilitators. If we're doing a studio completely with one community or organization, and there's someone there that we can train to facilitate, we'll often co-facilitate. So in person, I would sit next to them. They do all the questioning, and sometimes I'd say, oh, you know what? Yeah, let's also ask about this, and then allow them to still maintain facilitation of that group. And that can be helpful to alleviate some of the trust barriers as well as language barriers. So that's a little bit on that. They should also be very organized and timely, because as you saw, the time does go very quickly. And when you, for us, our researchers are paying for our services, so we want to make sure that we get to all of the questions that they have. And if it's important to make sure you're able to kind of time how long you spend on each question. And we've narrowed this down to kind of a science on creating a template and even a script for some facilitators to learn from. And then be engaging, as you saw, responding, being personable, not just ignoring the random comments that come up, or about the chili dog. That was something that I thought was a great example of what this means to be engaging, to listen to people and then respond to them appropriately, and to match communication style as well with the group. So I think those are some basic aspects of a good facilitator. If you'll go to the next slide, please. This facilitator's job is to create that guide for themselves. So questions and prompts that they will use to get the information that's needed by the research team, review and edit slides, or prepare the researcher to give their presentation, set ground rules for the group and lead introductions, set the context and purpose of the studio, manage the direction and flow of the conversation, time management, get focused feedback, and engage all experts. So during Zoom, we started out by keeping a list of who was there and making sure, as a facilitator, I checked off who answered how many questions and what questions, because it can be easy to not feel, you're not physically seeing everyone with you, so you can't physically go around the room, right? So that's one thing that's very helpful, is to make sure you engage all experts and develop your own process to do that. People that make a great facilitator are great at conversation. We found that people that have an educational or public speaking background do really well, because they've been trained to work with people from different backgrounds, and also to manage different communication styles. And one fun thing we do for our training is when someone's observing a facilitator, to kind of read the room themselves as an observer and note what type of speakers we have around the table and how the facilitator can overcome some of these facilitation challenges. Next slide, or I don't know if we were going to a poll. I don't have that on my list. Next slide.
I think we're pausing for a poll.
Oh, we're pausing for a poll.
We're pausing for a poll, and then I will try to like wrap us up. It's okay, no worries, friends.
Thank you.
We occasionally have some logistic things.
I'll turn it over to Tiffany.
We've obviously not had a lot of experience doing polls. I hope you all are finding these entertaining. So that's not what we discussed for 400. Which research team action made us shake our heads? This is for 400, so I feel like you all are taking it way more seriously than the other ones, and I appreciate that. All right, answers are coming in quickly. I'm going to give you guys just like 30 more seconds. Make your last minute choices. I'm trying not to keep you late today. I know everyone's had a long Zoom day. All right, 10 seconds. Everybody throw your last second answer in. Okay, 40 voted. Okay, so here's where we are. You guys are really taking these seriously, and I do appreciate this. So the correct answer on this one is that um, on the day of the community engagement studio, the PI actually showed up 15 minutes before the studio without the materials and videos that were actually supposed to be the focus of the CES discussion. And yes, that actually happened. And it was one of those moments where I was so happy that my former boss, Yvonne Jostin, who many of you know, was there. And she just kind of gently put her hand on my shoulder and said, "We can do this. We can do this." And so since we didn't have the videos, this was a young group of women who had young children. They were supposed to be giving feedback on videos that were around prenatal care, breastfeeding, things of that nature. I basically led a discussion asking them what they would want to see in the videos. What makes a good video? What makes a bad video? What are elements that they feel like should be included? Who should deliver the information? So it ended up being a phenomenal studio. We got great evals on it. But man, 15 minutes before that studio, I really wasn't sure what we were going to do since we were supposed to be watching videos and looking at materials. We did have a PI once forget that he had a studio, and that was on the NIH campus. Also turned out fine. So remember earlier when we said go with the flow? Just go with the flow. It's all going to work out eventually, right? So next slide, please. Good job, guys. Oh, I'm not sure who's driving slides, but we'll move forward. We're going to wrap this up as quickly as possible. Facilitating pitfalls. I don't know if you all could tell, I love facilitating. It's so much fun. I like getting to know people. I love hearing their story. I think that's the social worker in me that misses that part of being able to really work with the community on a day in and day out. So that little piece of my job lets me keep doing that, and I love it. So there are some challenges, obviously, to facilitating. And I will say today was a really amazing group. They were easy to facilitate. We have had some tricky folks in studios. We have folks who have yelled at us. We have folks who have walked out. I can't remember if this is a poll question, so I don't want to give you all the answers, but we have had some folks who have really acted all sorts of ways that kind of like took me by surprise a little bit. And I always maintain my poker face, right? Just remember, like, everybody's got something going on. So here are some of the most common things I think you need to work on if you want to facilitate studios. So the first is not reining in folks when they start to kind of veer off the path. And this happens quite often, particularly when folks are sharing really personal details about health conditions or healthcare journeys. So it may start with them sharing like what their treatment looked like for lupus, but then it might end with when their grandma was diagnosed with liver cancer. So you have to be really mindful of trying to keep people kind of on the path and keeping them relevant. but at the same time allowing them enough space to unpack their story. And that is a delicate balance. And I think you saw today that a lot of the feedback we get in studios is through storytelling, because that's just human nature. That's who we are. So you have to kind of just practice that skill of knowing when and how to let people have some space and time. I will tell you, if we start talking about something really sensitive, I give a lot more space and time, because I just think you have to do that. We were in a studio once with a father. It was parents who had children with sickle cell, with two sickle cell providers. The father shared that his first child had actually died from sickle cell. And so their family had been really impacted by this. And this is why he was so passionate about improving care, improving services for families who were going through this. And at some point, the researcher chimed in. She was sort of like beside me, and she chimed in and said, I don't want to rush us, but I just feel like we know a lot of this stuff that's already being talked about. And so I just paused for a second, because that was just on the heels of his comment, and said, it's okay. I think it's important just to trust the process. We have a lot to learn. And if you give folks just a little time and space, I think we're going to hear a lot more. So I encourage you, just sit back and trust the process. I promise we'll get out on time. But I think that that's important for folks to be sensitive to and mindful of. Overlooking the quiet people, I always try to share at the very beginning, as we did with our training today. If you're a talker, be mindful of not over talking. And if you generally are quiet and don't like to share, know that I am going to call on you. Yolanda, when she has facilitated before, has said to folks, okay, Heidi, we haven't heard from you today, and I know we're paying you, so I'm giving you a heads up. We're going to circle back around to you in just a few minutes, so get ready. So a lot of times when I have someone who I know is a little more introverted, a little more quiet, I usually will start on the opposite end and come to them last to give them time to think about the question. So I've already picked up that this is a quiet person. This is someone who doesn't like to share as much. So I might ask the question and then say, okay, so actually I'm going to start with Brieanne for this question, but Yolanda, I'm going to end with you. So just know we'll be circling back around. So now Yolanda knows, okay, she's going to come and ask me this question. I'm going to have to start thinking about my answer. In terms of dominating, I've had both PIs as well as community experts who have attempted to kind of take over the facilitation of the dialogue. And I'm sure you all have seen that happen in a lot of different group settings where you're trying to facilitate meetings and dialogue. I try to be specific in my request, but gently word it. So if it's time for us to move on, or if I need to pause something, something we learned in community organizing is I might say, Marquetta, that is actually an excellent point. Thank you so much for sharing that. But if you don't mind, I'm going to pause us on that topic for a second. I'm going to have Leah write it down in the notes. So if we have time, we'll come back to it. But I'm worried we won't get to talk about the 3 key things we said we'd talk about today. But I don't want to lose that feedback. So hopefully I validated what Marquetta said. I showed that it had importance and value, and I've said that I will make space for it at the end if we have the ability to come back to it. And so generally when you treat people with respect and decency like that, they don't get upset because they're like, oh yeah, you're right. We had a gentleman in a traumatic brain injury studio recently that was all online, and he interrupted me and said, Tiffany, can I just for one quick second? I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Did you have something to share? I just wanted to say that you're being really patient with all of us TBI folks, because I know sometimes we interrupt and we go on, and we just really appreciate that you're being, so kind and patient, because I did have to keep kind of saying, okay, well, Megan, that was great. I'm going to pause us. We're going to jump to this next one, but he recognized that I was trying really hard to do that. And then the last piece is when you have really emotional reactions. And I've only had a handful of people get angry in studios. The worst I think I had was a woman at a studio in Alabama who said she was very dominating in the studio. She had a lot to share and she was really opinionated. And I had to keep kind of like steering us in different directions. And eventually she just said, you know what? If you didn't want to hear my opinion today, why did you invite me here? And I said, well, Jillian, I think we have heard a lot about your opinion today, and I want to hear more, but I'm really sensitive to the fact that I haven't heard from Heidi or Leah or Carla, and I just want to make sure they have some space to share as well. And she got quiet. That was it, that one angry comment. And then after the studio, we got a great evaluation from her. She said she enjoyed the experience. And my guess is that is not the first time she has heard that comment said before. Those of us who are talkers kind of know that. So those are some of the pitfalls. Next slide, please. Really quickly, some ninja facilitation. Boy, this virtual studio facilitating has been tricky. So in person, Bree mentioned earlier, we use a lot of facilitation skills when we're in person. I am known, my team makes fun of me. If you are an oversharer and overtalker, I will start to walk close and close that space between me and you. And it just makes people feel uncomfortable to have that physical presence being like right next to them. And they start to sense, maybe I make eye contact, like very intense eye contact with them. I'm a Carl Rogers, therapist, where I'll make that eye contact and I'm nodding, and then I might put my finger up so they know, oh, she's gonna interrupt me. I can see it's coming. I've been known to lay hands on folks. I will lay my hand on your shoulder and they'll be like, oh, okay, it's probably time. So all of those things that we used to do when we were in person, I can't do anymore. And so I've really spent this last year trying to finesse my Zoom facilitation skills, and I still have so much to learn. I have on one occasion muted somebody in a Zoom studio because they would not stop talking, and I muted them, and Leah messaged them and said, we're so sorry, we've had to mute you so we can move on, or something like that. And he was really, really cool about it. So it's we're all learning from each other, and I think that's what's most important. So those are my ninja facilitation skills. I would tell you guys. Bree said she leans into her camera, which is brilliant. I have not done that. That's really funny. That's great. All right, next slide. So we have a little bit of a group exercise. Is it okay if I pause for a moment and ask Alicia and Colleen if you have an opinion about us pushing forward for this group exercise?
We have the time for it, and we have our breakout rooms ready.
Perfect. So we're going to push through then, because I think this is fun. It also gives you all an opportunity to be in a breakout room with your colleagues. Please have conversations, talk, meet each other. I think that's so important. So we have case studies that are provided for each breakout room. We have 5 of them. We're going to ask you to read through that case study, and then we want you to develop a short facilitation guide. What are some key questions that you would ask to get the information that you're supposed to get for that studio? Because we will have in there, these are the things you're supposed to get feedback on. We're going to give you about 15 minutes. We'll jump back in the large room, and then we'll do a quick share out, and then we'll wrap up for the day. You will have a staff moderator in all of your breakout rooms. So if I said that too fast or you have questions, you have someone you can lean on. And with that, Alicia or Colleen, is there anything else I need to do?
Everybody stand by. We're going to move you to your breakout rooms.
Exciting. I'll see some of you in a minute.
And I'll stay in this main room in
Thank
case anybody
you.
comes in late.